Yeah, so I'm trained as an architect as well as interior designer, and I have also worked in the field of craft. So it's sort of a cusp that, I work at. And also, I look at architecture and build form through the lens of material makers and making, and how there is a very profound and innate role and contribution of makers within that. So I'm going to focus on community and tacit knowledge and how education becomes important in tapping that. And I'm just going to, I have too many slides, but I'll just try to just flip over because they are visuals. Yeah, so this is one project. Just a minute. Yeah. So here I'm talking about the makers of this building called Radhaswamy Samath, and it comes within the larger umbrella of built heritage and building crafts. And this is a very, very fascinating building. It is getting constructed for more than 125 years, and it is still being constructed. And it has very, very fascinating narratives of crafts, culture, and how the belief system of a spiritual cult gets reflected in the architecture of a built form. So it was a very transdisciplinary research for me, and it has inputs from linguistics, architecture, crafts, cognizance, psychology, religion. I'm still working on it. I've produced a documentary with a German counterpart. So, in bits and pieces, we are still investigating it. So, that's how this building looks like. And it's quite massive and grand. It's 200 feet in height from the ground to the topmost point of its spire. It's in Agra, which is also a very, very famous city because we have Taj Mahal in Agra. And there's also a bit of this iconography and symbolism in this building also, because the group wanted to have some building for congregation and celebrate their cult and create a sort of a icon and something as grand as Taj Mahal. So lots of stories about that also. It's done entirely in stone and it has very, very exquisite craftsmanship in, marble. And there are these generations of craftspersons who are working on this building as part of their duty also. And many of them are not trained craftspersons, but as part of the duty, they have got training on the site. And the very interesting part is also that most of the times there is no working drawing or a rationale for making it. It's only, through certain memory associations or certain natural details, leaves and flowers that they see around them, and then they just try to create an impression of that. So here, if you see this one, this is like a 5 inches deep carving, which is even rare in most of the beautiful and glamorous temples of India. This is even more depth. So it's the base of the dome on the fourth floor, and this is a sectional elevation. So I created the measure drawings of this building for the first time, and it was very challenging because I didn't want anybody to intrude and disturb their religious proceedings and all of that. And they didn't want any kind of documentation to be done. And they didn't want this detail to be out in public. But yeah, I had to go through the entire process of permission and everything. So, what I was trying here, I was trying to create these kinds of inventories and just trying to understand that what is the system of making which is embedded within the architecture or the construction of this building. What is the hierarchy of makers? How many people work on a certain piece? How much time does it take? How small could be the smallest arch to the biggest arch? Does it get made in one piece, two piece, three pieces? So it was very fascinating. And yeah, so the dome that I was talking about, how many pieces is it made out of, and all of that. So this was based on all the interactions on the site. And then I could find that it's almost like 50% of the building and its stories are narrated through inlay work and the carving work. So 50% of the stone is actually this detailed craftsmanship, and 50% of the stone is plain. So that was the sort of distribution. And then I could also document and study the tools that are used, like hand tools, power tools. And from the very first ground floor, which had all the hand tools used, to today in 2024, there are also some machines which are being used. So there is a mix of all of these. And again, then how they do actually the carving on the site, and how do they take a flower from their just nearby surroundings and then they create it on the stone. So that's sort of a 3D volumetric exploration. So that is what was done. And these are again the inventories that I elaborated. So this one is on arch. What kinds of arches? What is the build form? Is it Greek? Is it Gothic? Is it Islamic? Is it Hindu? So, and what are the meanings and symbolism and semantics that they carry? In how many ways are they made, and what are the functions? So this is only for arch and then column, and then I decoded the entire building into these elements, building elements. And then for each element, I tried to just see like how it is made and what is the role of the craftsperson, and how this building becomes an exemplary illustration of telling stories, and then it's getting shaped through crafts, and they become a narrative medium to tell about the making of this building. So the documentary film, I've not yet launched it publicly, but we are going to do it soon. So maybe I'll be able to share the link. So that's almost done. And this is very interesting. So these are not like technical architectural drawings. So what we call as capital for column, they call it as bharna. So they have their local parlance, they have their own terminologies, and they would just, so like as an architect, I would call this as an spandrel, but they would call it as sitara. So it was very interesting to also understand their vocabulary and how they work on site and through their sketches and their languages. So that was one. This is in the domain of tangible and intangible cultural heritage. And this is an initiative that I'm trying to steer here at IIT Roorkee since 2014. Dharohar loosely translates to heritage. And I have like some funding from different agencies. And here, so how also the academic exercises and architecture design studios become an important part of, field documentations, and sort of become a part of methodology for working on these kinds of projects. So this is funded by Ministry of Culture, the Indian Ministry of Culture. And it began by, field visits and creating these route maps. So these were very illustrative, and this was just simply our journey from where to where we went. And if I have a typical memory for this place, what it could be and what were this like. So this is again some stone temples which are very, very famous from the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand. So this entire project focuses on that Himalayan state of Uttarakhand. So then I created these kinds of drawing portfolios. The buildings that I covered, they were 300 years old to 1,000 years old. And many of them, they only have been understood through oral narratives. So there were no drawings. So if you look at this furniture, this is a period furniture. We do not find this furniture anymore being used there. So I created these drawings. And my inspiration was also portfolio, which was sort of developed by S.S. Jacob. And he documented all these traditional buildings of Jaipur, and then he tried to showcase them to the world through these kinds of drawing portfolios. So I realized there was a huge opportunity, because for the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand, there were almost very few to nil portfolios of drawings and furniture like that. So then here my PhD became a part of this investigation. Then the students who did their master's thesis and now who are doing their PhD thesis, I'm continuing this investigation, and their research plugs in here. So it is still an ongoing thing. And again, like these interesting things. So this is an art form. This is a ceremonial art form that we see in this state. And it's very interesting to see this profound interrelationship between this art and the mathematics behind it. So there is a grid of 81 dots over here. And this is a very, very, so this plus and this central motif, this is very auspicious in India. It's called swastik. So how do they prepare the base? And this is done by women. And then what is the second step? So step A to step Z, how this kind of a painting is made. And also this is a part of social congregation and part of festivals and bringing people together. And a lot of women do it together. So I developed these visual and cultural narratives and tried to, sort of create illustrations and understand what's the process behind it. And then there were lots of participatory workshops which had people from academia. There were people from crafts background, and we put up also an exhibition. There is a In the upper Himalayas, there is a tribal community and who makes these very fascinating products out of wood, and some of them are not available. There is also copper, the traditional use of copper and timber. And we requested them to bring this to our own institute. It's a very tedious task to get something from, 8,000, 9,000 square feet to just in plains and be very, very open about sharing this treasure with us. So I was very grateful that we could organize this in our own school. So we also try to disseminate this knowledge that we, document, and we create these repositories, and then we try to disseminate them through trade fairs, craft bazaars, and some kinds of exhibitions, etc. And then through journals and newspapers. These are visual inventories that I had developed, and I put these up in lots of exhibitions. So this is one 350 years old house, and these houses have this very, very beautiful facade, and it's a part of their way of life. And they embrace ornamentation for all reasons. And this is the interior of the house, and all of these artworks have very fascinating stories behind it. So some artworks are auspicious for a married couple, some for childbirth, and so on. So they have, then one is like tree of life, and so on. So all of these stories we tried to capture, and then there were collaborative studios with Aalto in Finland and Arvitia in Aachen, where we visited these clusters. These were some monographs that I could develop and get published. And these were some papers in encyclopedia entries. And I also run this course called Role of Craft and Technology in Interior Architecture. This is supported by Ministry of Education, and this is running successfully for the last 7 years. Then yeah, so this is my some repositories that I developed as part of my PhD. These drawing portfolios that I was talking about, 3D exploded views and material, and what are the kinds of different motifs, geometric and all. Different kinds of crafts which go on a furniture level, which go on a product level, the ones which are seen as surface embellishments, and the one which are like very, very structural, and they hold the entire structure of the building itself. So I made this system of classification, and then I documented these crafts. And again, there is this system of composition here. So when are the motifs repeating? Are they recurring, not recurring? Is there a symmetry over here? At what eye level do we see these kinds of details? Are they visible from the road level? Is there some kind of a system that the one which is the topmost point is more ornate and is more detailed because I can see it from the road level versus the one which is in front of me? So placement, composition, eye level, all of that. This is another project which is ongoing. This is rejuvenating the handlooms of Northeast India. This is supported by NABARD. And here also we were trying to work with the community of weavers, and so many clusters and communities, meetings with the officials. And this is one cluster. This is another one. They also have this very interesting ecosystem and how they use bamboo for eating to the space making, their own homes and workshops. And we just try to understand what is again their system. Do they follow some kind of motifs, patterns? What is their color palette? All of that. We also took some proposals with us, and we asked them whether these kinds of designs are possible. Some they said, okay, we can manage your whims and fancies, and some they outrightly discarded that you don't know the craft and this design will not work at all. So it was a great learning. So yeah, this was another cluster, and these were some very beautiful woolens and shawls, etc. And we had very specific observations for each cluster. Few were willing to experiment and get into the commercial zone, and few were not willing to change their ways of making, and they stuck to the most original and the most beautiful and intricate pieces which we do not see in the commercial domain. So it was nice to see that variation. So we tried their attire also, and just few months after our visit, actually very recently, this dress called Risha, it has got a GI tag. It was recognized very recently. So yeah, this was the another project, and we recently produced this report, which has all our findings, and we presented it to the government. And we are working on the second report now. This is for the handlooms, and now we are working for handicrafts. Yeah, I have a lot of visuals, so I'll just try to flip over and browse through. These are some findings of the 5-year project that I recently completed, like finished with Arvitia, Germany. It's called Experimental Architecture and Material Culture. We have not stopped our initiatives of continuing this work, and like through some or the other way, workshops or summer schools or other kinds of fundings, we have continued to work on it. But this got over on 31st December 23. And here we have this shared vision where we have tried to create a platform for makers, artists, architects, industrial designers, craftspersons, and then we have tried to sort of document and investigate the material culture aspects. We primarily focused on stone and earth, and some part of bamboo and timber also, very little on iron, specifically cast iron, but we are working on it. So these were some of the site visits and interactions that we had, and again also looking at the way of life and food and culture and everything. There is this UNESCO chair of it's called Auroville Earth Institute, and when we were focusing on the earth material part, we had this collaboration with them, try to understand the traditional methods of working with stone, lime plaster, etc. Some essays that we produced under these baskets of making, phenomenology, education and learning, and then innovation in design build. Like Professor was talking about creating this open source, we have also sort of produced this an online encyclopedia which is ever growing. This also has to be launched publicly, and we have to put it on the website. But it has these kinds of data sets. So our encounters, interviews, site visits, all of that across India, Germany, France. So these are some screenshots of that. We made like 13 experimental mock-ups with students and as part of workshops, also capacity building the craftspersons, learning from them also. So this is not the complete. So this article got published when the prototype was not finished, but now it is complete. So we made these mock-ups, and 3 out of these are actually produced life size, and they are installed in the universities. So we also generated maps, like whatever stones and earth kinds we are documenting across India, which prominent parts do they come from. Then we created these building inventories. We did primary research, identified some very interesting buildings or building typologies, residential to commercial to office, institutional, all of that. And then we made their drawings and discussed about their material aspects. This is again producing some essays. This was the exercise that I was talking about, the 13 experimental mock-ups. So trying to understand what is the material, what is the cultural aspect, what's the also the cultural exchange between India and Germany, where do we see the similar nuances? Historically, how stone was used, and then in contemporary times, how can we use it? Can we use the attributes of modularity, etc., for today's building construction? Is it hand made or CNC made, or is it a combination of hand and machines? How many pieces come together? What is the total weight? How will I transport this? How will it get fabricated? So this was only for stone. We had also for earth. And then we produced life size few of them from each category. More of essays. And we went also to the quarry site, and then we had this workshop where we actually had an industry partner and we produced these prototypes. This was very interesting. We actually also designed the tool on site. So this was a tool, and if we had we had to put these modular pieces of stone, and we have to check the alignment. So we created this tool also on site out of the waste pieces of stone. So it was very interesting working with PhD students, industry partners, and craftspersons. We also did some simulations. So this prototype was inspired by Indian stupa and German domical structures. And using the waste pieces of stone that get left over from the projects, we tried to utilize and capitalize the attribute of modularity, etc. And then we tried to create permutations and combinations of that. It could be seating space, exhibition space, sculpture, pavilion, anything that you would want it to be. 4 meter cross 4 meter cross 4 meter volume, etc. This was another one which was inspired by an arch. We documented these films that I was talking about, which focus on exquisite craftsmanship from India. This one is from that building which I showed as the first project. They have this beautiful inlay and that 5 inches deep carving that I showed you, that Agra building. So the film is like quite interesting. And we had put up this exhibition, a voyage to India, and we did this 3D printing of. This is basically done by the German professor. We were only knowledge partners in that, but that EAMC project we did collaboratively. This was an extension of that. While I and my students were visiting to Germany, and this was also a very fascinating exhibition. Yeah. Some work that we do collaboratively. This is initiated by another colleague at IIT Roorkee, but we had an integrated vertical studio, UG, PG, like undergraduate, graduate, and we developed this on site with the community of craftspersons. This is in bamboo, basically. Yeah, and this is the last one probably. This is promoting tourism and culture, and this is the basket of intangible cultural heritage. And we did this series of projects. We are still working on them as part of G20 presidency of India. There's this one public art and community project where we are working with the women self-help group and community youth representatives. And what kinds of stories do they want us to, showcase in the streets and to make those streets vibrant? Because the government has not yet launched it, I will not be able to show most of the work that we did for this project. But we have these 5 locations where we are doing this kind of work, and these are the kinds of stories that we are trying to focus on, from folklore to cuisine to everything. Yeah. And yeah, so these were some creatives that we developed for the G20 events. These are already launched and in public domain. So we were trying to showcase Uttarakhand, the Himalayan state of Uttarakhand. Internationally, we were trying to showcase it by tapping its potential as a creative city and what are the interesting aspects of its culture, tourism, cuisine, etc. So we try to develop, this is called Brahma Kamal. This is a very exquisite flower. It is found only in very, very high altitudes in mountains. So these were all like hand illustrated and then sort of digitized, and we created these designs, and they were put up during G20 events when we had international congregation. So, and this is again very interesting because Uttarakhand is known for religious tourism. So we have lots of temples devoted to Lord Shiva and so on. So what are these popular temples, and what does this state look like in terms of religious tourism? Also in terms of creating its identity, like this is basically a map of Uttarakhand, one part of it, which is then put together as a floral. So more of these creatives. We have very, very interesting hill museums. There are 3 hill museums that this state has, and it requires a lot of intervention. And they have like really exquisite pieces and objects and material culture details, which are sort of going to be lost. So we are trying to also focus on projects like that. Yeah, this is some adventure, so I'll just browse through it. Some particular animals and plants that we find over there. Again, just trying to showcase and highlight the crafts through, certain maps and certain graphics. This is very interesting. So, UNESCO has given this tag to Raman. Raman is a version of Ramayana, the ancient scripture from India. And this is basically a theatrical and performing art. So we just tried to showcase through flat illustrations how the community wears masks and does this performing art at the time of, these festivities in India. So this was very interesting, very bold colors, and women basically are more dominant in this performance, and we have just tried to capture those aspects through some graphics. So yeah, so adventure. This again very famous two sisters who are like really revered and worshipped their story. Again, some maps for religious tourism, some archaeological sites which are very, very fascinating. This is the We have Haridwar, which is a sacred land of Ganges, and people from all over the world come over there. Some very rare and exquisite animals that we find here. So this bird is found only in Uttarakhand. It's called Monal. So these were the kinds of graphics we were trying to do. This is the Jim Corbett. It's the forest reserve, and yeah, so we had citizen engagement and community partnership, and we first tried to gauge what is it that they want to show. And this is with the Department of Tourism, and they also had lots of inputs for us already. So we just tried to. So, like this one has a very interesting story. If your wish is fulfilled, you have to leave this goat near this temple. You wouldn't sacrifice it, but just leave it. So we were just trying to capture those narratives and then just trying to put these are the famous religious aspects. Yeah, all of that. So interesting fairs and festivals. Yeah, I think I don't have time. I had a film also, but maybe next time. Thank you so much for your time and attention.